Yesterday afternoon, we saw that enhanced risk got issued with SBC for the event going on today. I'm bringing a video about this because I didn't get a chance to do anything yesterday. I was actually in my college's weather center, kind of working with other biology students to forecast what's going to happen. And I'll show you that forecast in a little bit. But today we're looking at our enhanced risk. I won't really be looking at the slight marginal risk just because I want to focus on this kind of complex setup going on over here. So welcome to this video and enjoy. So for our synoptic scale stuff, this is the RAP model here. I'm always a fan of the RAP model. Dated actually. I'm always a fan of the RAP model. It's a very good short range model. Mostly because I don't like the NAM as much because you go by 3 frames every time. So you're from 21Z to 0Z, that's 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. in 1 frame. I don't think it shows the environment very well, and I think it's kind of counterintuitive. I'm using the RAP for today just because it's an easier model to work with short range stuff until I find a better other short range model, not just the RAP. Regarding our synaptic skill stuff, we have a pretty well-defined high-pressure ridge over here, kind of central to centered right here near Missouri. We have a pretty well-defined trough that is weakening. Maybe some associated jet streaks with it right over here near Idaho. So see a surrounding, you can see Idaho right here, then Wyoming and stuff, and then Missouri and Illinois right here. So regarding that, this trough will slowly eject throughout the day, and you can see the stronger flow with it is mostly associated right next to that trough. So here's the center of flow, and it's very close to this trough where the most flow really is. However, we do this a little bit of a jet streak more to the east, which does coincide pretty well with our risk zone. So we're looking into the surface stuff mostly because that is the main, really the main event with all of this. But it is worthy to note here that 500 millibars, there's enhanced flow here near South Dakota and near this Wyoming area, as well as at 700 millibars. You can see a little bit of a short wave going on here near Nebraska. Kind of, again, this belt of more flow. You see, little dips in the contour lines, and again, a little bit of associated stronger flow a lot here. The other levels don't really show anything as similar. A little bit of 850 millibar flow, but nothing really too into the. Our service map is where things get very interesting, and that's what I'm going to be going up to here pretty soon. So I'm going to close in on the sector here, but just remember that here was our kind of belt of more enhanced flow when I showed that 500 millibar level. Again, I can go back to that real quick. It's timing. But ahead of that, right there's your enhanced flow right around 19Z, 18Z. So that is something to keep in mind regarding this event. Regarding temperature, usually our systems will have a low pressure system. So you'll get a low pressure center, you get a warm front, you get a cold front, and sometimes you get like a dry line right here. Then you get storms forming off this dry line. They move off this way into the open warm sector. However, in our case, this is the exact opposite, and I will be talking about that in a second as to why that really is. As you can see, when I go to 20Z, you can see it's really hot, right? So our low pressure center, it's a little hard to tell right now, but looking at 13Z, run of the RAP, you can kind of see this cyclonic flow right here, right kind of South Dakota, Nebraska, right where my cursor is right here. There's a 1014 center, kind of dies out throughout the day. You can see this low pressure kind of spreads out, isn't really as well defined as you go on later today. You can kind of see that flow when it kind of moves to the east here, but where you just expect storms would be right here, kind of on the warm sector of the area. However, you have to remember that big old ridge that we had at the 500 millibar level, that's going to dampen a lot of any possible storm coverage in this open warm sector. Ridging means you get a lot of sinking motion. That's not very good for thunderstorms. So instead, we're actually going to be getting storms over here near the cooler air, but closer temperature dew point spreads. You can see for the most part, everywhere there is this very widespread 70s all over the United States. You have Missouri, Illinois, Wisconsin, some reaching the Hudson Bay, Minnesota, South Dakota, and parts of Nebraska and South Dakota here, and then parts of Iowa as well. But overall, very widespread high dew points for the system. The other thing to keep in mind, though, is there is a low pressure, pretty strong low pressure at that, way up there near Canada. You can see it you can see the dipping in the contours here. So way up here, we have about 1003 millibars, and that does increase as you go down. But if I were to draw a cold front here, you can kind of see it pretty well defined. You can see the temperature boundary right here, but you can also see the pressure tongues right here. You can kind of put a pretty sweeping cold front all the way down here, just based on the temperature gradient. You can see it's definitely colder on this side and warmer here, and you do have that bit of a wind shift as you get closer to the United States here. This cold front is going moving south slowly throughout the day, and that is kind of a forcing mechanism for all of these storms. I'll move closer. This is a lot to take in, and it's a very confusing setup. We spent about 3 hours in this weather lab just kind of looking at all this, trying to figure out what was going on. That cold front's the main forcing mechanism, and one thing also to note is that CAPE is kind of high for this system, so I'll take MU CAPE just so you can see the potential for this CAPE here. Out here, we're already seeing 4,000 plus. I mean, this is all the way at 12 Cs. That would be right now. A very primed atmosphere out here, besides the capping in place, which is likely to erode. Some of these storms do have a chance. They're pretty strong, but I think these are mostly hail storms. I forget to mention what the main risks were. We did a 5% kind of area here in South Dakota, Minnesota. The wind is probably the main threat now. It actually was originally hail, but I think wind's the main threat as we get closer to the event here. You can see our sounding here as well. Lots of CAPE. Not the best shear though for supercells. So mostly more unidirectional shear. In this case, it's the Minnesota storms, kind of way ahead of what we'll be seeing. And I'll be looking at the short range, the very small reflectivity more so models pretty soon. But regarding the synoptic, we have this surface low. It's fairly weak, but is in place. You can see here a pretty well defined kind of convergence boundary here. I don't think there's what was the case yesterday. Actually, a bit of a dry slot, which is also still in here. So a dry slot is basically a dry line, but in like a smaller form. You can see right here we do have winds out of the more east and the maybe a little bit out of the north, kind of here. You can watch this dew points in this section right here near Nebraska. Decreases and then they tighten up right along this boundary. Especially right here, it's pretty well defined. You have 72-degree dew points and 55-degree dew points, very close proximity, basically within one county of each other. You end up with a bit of a dry slot into this open, better air, which is behind the cold front. So that leads to there being better relative humidity along this whole sector here. So, as I was saying, right here, when that dry slot kind of tightens up, see a lot of really not very good air down here. The relative humidity is very low. Out in front of, on the north side, you do have that better humidity. And that will help to fuel those storms, especially when they're trying to grow. Other thing to take into account here is that the 500 millibar trough, starting right here, the temperature is very cold, especially in this Wyoming area. So this is kind of a cold core-esque setup. If anything, actually, it's kind of a cold core setup. It's what it is. You have a tightening low right here near Wyoming, so you can see the cyclonic flow. You have more southerly here, a little bit more out of the west over here, out of the northeast, or more out of the east even. Kind of see that rotation kind of making itself known right here. And then as a result there, you'll get on the warm front some storms forming, which we'll see in the HRRR and all those fronts. As a result, we came up with this. A little bit of a mess. We had that dry slot here that would help storms initiate near South Dakota, Nebraska. Here is showing our better relative humidity, 77 over 73 dew points. This is our stronger flow aloft, and we have saying this kind of CAPE values that have decreased now, so the CAPE in that relative humidity area is not as strong anymore. You can see that low over Canada and the moist air on both sides. This area is too hot and moist to really get anything going. Pretty dry air as well. But for the most part, storms kind of initiate here, move into that better relative humidity and kind of fuel and grow. And in the meantime, you're getting, again, more convergence along these two boundaries. These winds are moving together. The other thing we didn't take into account, though, would be the fact that there's this low pressure out here near Wyoming. And that could actually be a really good help for storms because you're ending up with better warm, moist air here. They're warm front kind of, and this could be kind of moving into this area here as well. That actually could be the main forcing of these storms, as we'll see in the HRRR in a second right now. Looking at the HRRR run, go back to 12Z is current time basically. Move through the morning hours here. You get some storms forming, basically right where I said they were, kind of in that cold core setup. These are kind of a mix of multicells and supercells, as said by the SPC. Leave right somewhere in here. Several multicells and supercells are expected by mid to late afternoon. Right here, 20Z, that's mid to late afternoon. Kind of a mix of supercells and multicells here. I originally thought this was probably the best idea for tornadoes, but definitely more of a tornado risk over here in South Dakota. Then as these kind of congeal, you'll end up with stronger downdrafts, and these will begin to form a Boeing line segment. You can see another Boeing line segment happening out here in Minnesota, and this one will kind of punch through according to the HRRR. However, what we didn't see here really was a bunch of storms forming right here because of that dry slot. What I am seeing here, though, is regarding that dry slot, that HRRR did not like to ever put this, really show it too well. You can see it right here, but it's not nearly as well defined as you saw in the RAP model. However, it is still there in its entirety, but I think in this case, this is the only real storm that really gets formed by it. So we'll see how that really plays out in the future. Looking at the other models here, I'm really using Pivotal Weather because I can have all these other models here. I'm kind of limited on odd website. We're just really looking at reflectivity for the most part, just because I want to compare how everything looks. Yeah, I can create this look through here, just kind of look at the reflectivity. You can see again that those bands of storms out there in New Wyoming, and then just move through, get some formation here in South Dakota, Wyoming, South Dakota, Nebraska. These ones don't look too nearly as severe actually, so that's interesting to know. I think that this will definitely be more of a potent setup than these are showing right now. The NAM NST storms forming out in Wyoming, and it looks like those ones might be a main reason for storm initiation. It does look like these models are kind of disagreeing a little bit as to where these southern storms will form. South Dakota and Nebraska storms, that's where they're disagreeing. They agree on this Wyoming stuff, and they do agree on this Boeing line segment out here near Minnesota because of the fact that that becomes uncapped earlier than we see any of the other areas. The WRF, let's see here. In this case, we get the storms near Wyoming, and those do form a little bit of a Boeing line. And same deal as the HRRR, it's much stronger look here near Minnesota. So it's very possible we'll see this actually getting more extended over here. Maybe the enhanced risk gets a little here. But again, I'm not one to be saying all that as of now. Depends on what the total ensemble looks like. Here was last night's 0Z ensemble. We're looking at updraft helicity here. You can see our probabilities. I like to see our probabilities. You can see reflectivity of the HRRR in the background, and then you can see these contours, which are basically your probability of updraft helicity, which is just rotation in storms. It's something I like to look at when looking at a one-day model. And we look forward here, we get a 30% probability of updraft helicity here, which quickly increases into a 70%, as well as a 50% out here near that southwest South Dakota. And this is basically conglomerating all these models. This is also old, though. Don't forget, this is from 0Zs. This is about 12 hours old, and lots of things can change leading closer to an event, especially because of the last night's storms. You don't really know. Sure. For the most part, the updraft helicity seems to be confined to South Dakota, and especially this bullseye right here, as we see it out there, 5% tornado risk. And that's basically the forecast for today. Again, there's all these ensembles we can look at, but at the moment, this one's not out, I don't think. I can try to relook. I highly doubt, because the 12Z HRRR run is not out yet. So there's lots of potential interest in this system for me. I took a lot of time looking at this, and I think this will be very interesting. I still think that our main area of interest for storms, like if you were from a chaser perspective, would definitely be out here. You get a kind of a band of supercells. Also, you're in Wyoming. You get a chance to go on the upper plateau over here. It's a big opportunity you should take. I think that's definitely an area of interest. However, regarding wind, I think this likely is the main threat, especially those tornado possibilities. But I think Minnesota might be underrated by myself, not the SPC. I just think that I'm looking at this enough, and there's a very possibility this is going to blow up in 9 hours. So we'll be seeing how this goes later, and if anything interesting happens, I'll have another video out, or maybe a community post about it. Otherwise, that's it for this video. Again, this is very quickly going to be outdated, the outlook, so take what I said with a little bit with a grain of salt. But for the most part, the system is still the same. We're looking at accurate model runs. It's just that the SPC's outlook will soon be different from what you're seeing here, probably before this video even gets out. So with that, thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.